G'day, it's Dr. Dave here again, historian and sometimes archaeologist. Today I'm at the appropriately named Tramline Beach on the beautiful Smiths Lake, just south of Foster on the mid-north coast, New South Wales. And today we're going to have a bit of a walk around the water landing of the Narani to Smiths Lake logging tramway that went from this location here, where we are on the southern side of Smiths Lake, by a tramway up that way, about 2.2 kilometres to what is now Hart's Point on the northern shore of Myall Lake, within Myall Lakes National Park. There's another section of this tramway, hopefully it doesn't flare too much. Through the gap there you can see perhaps some houses in the distance. That's Tarbuck Bay. On the left of that gap is Big Point, on the right is Big Island. But past Big Point on the left is where the Tarbuck Bay tramway came out of the hills in the back, which is the Wellingat National Park, which was then called the Tarbuck Scrub. Now these tramways date from the time that the Narani sawmill was established, around about 1873, and operated for about 34 years through till 1907. So let's have a bit of a walk around and see what we've got here. So what's different about this is it's not actually a jetty or a wharf. It's what I call a landing with a tramway formation. As you can see, the water level here is reasonably low at the moment. Only 2 weeks ago it had reached about 1.9 metres above the Australian height datum, basically sea level, which meant that the water was right up the bank there, lapping the road almost. They released it out of the bar at Sandbar, a couple of kilometres to the east in that direction. Smiths Lake is not a tidal lake as such. It's what's referred to as an eye-coal, an intermittently closing and opening lake or lagoon. So essentially it gets its water from the water catchment up in the hills, a lot of fresh water. It fills up until such time as it reaches a breach point across the bar and opens up. In this case, because of houses and other things in the catchment zone, the council opened it to allow the water to come out. Hence I've been able to come back. I have been here before, back in January, at the very height of the drought we had here, and the water was right out the back, at least another 100 metres back behind where it is currently now. So it enabled me to be able to walk around and have a look at some of the features further out. But the idea was that this was set up so that logs could be brought across from Tarbuck Bay and then offloaded at one of what I think was about 5, maybe even 6 landings on this side of the actual tramway alignment. So the tramway itself pretty much ran straight up here, and we'll have a look at that in a minute, with the landings on this side. The idea being, depending upon the water level, they could bring the logs up to any one of these landings, use horses to put them onto to take the logs that were sat on the bogies up to here somewhere perhaps, where they were then connected to the steam locomotive and taken up through this direction and through a cutting through the hill. So we'll have a look at that at some other time. So what evidence have we got left here? Well, it's obviously been quite a number of years since it's been in operation, 1907, and now it being 2020. I have indicated where I've found sleepers and can see the iron bolts in the sleepers, but in this instance we've got some sort of iron object. It's rectilinear, not sure, it might have been out of a boiler, firebox or something, or it could be part of actually a tramway bogie section of that at the top. Well, not sure. Obviously this is actually in a marine reserve, so I'm only looking and occasionally touching, but not digging up anything or interfering with any of the cultural or natural values here. And this is where I believe the tramway formation came down. Obviously there's a lot of sand over the top of what's below us, which would be more sleepers. So walking back towards the south, you can pretty clearly see the alignment where the sleepers are in front of us, which would obviously go off into the trees there, where the trees are now. I haven't had the metal detector out yet, but I'm going to do some work with that to try and identify the alignment. But based on what we can see here, that's pretty much where it runs to the south. And then over here, this is a little bit more interesting. Now, when I was here previously, I hadn't seen these, they were buried. So the wave action over the last 6 months with the water level up and down has changed things a bit. Now these large timbers here, as you can see, sorts of bolts through them all the way up. They look to me like the side timbers of a vessel or some other sort of wharf potentially, but probably a vessel, perhaps a drower. So there might be something in the local folklore about a drower being wrecked here, although more likely being abandoned here. Try not to sink into the mud. But yeah, they certainly look like ship's timbers on the side of the hull. Remember, drowers were a flat bottom and didn't have much of a curved side either, so potentially this would probably be one of the more accessible wrecks of a drower in this part of the world, I would think. Most of those that were around are either at the bottom of the lakes and rivers or burnt out years ago. So just taking in a general view, looking more or less north, as I said, that's where Tarbuck Bay is, the gap between Big Point and Big Island. When it's low water, it's probably difficult to get through there. They would have more likely, low water, come around the bottom end. There's a spike in there, an iron spike or bolt. See another one there. Probably on getting that on camera. More there. So you can actually see the sleepers, and I've indicated with the blue pin flags basically where those bolts are, showing the width of the line itself. It was actually timber rail under the water up to here somewhere where it would have been iron rail. The timber rail would have had, like the Tarbuck Tramway, basically an iron strap on the top and an iron strap pinned onto the inside of the inside edges of those rails for the cast iron wheels to flanged wheels of the bogies to roll on and wear on. We've got a boiler here, or remains of a boiler. So you can see it's the one end of it, cylindrical boiler, probably a vertical boiler by the look of it. Sorry about the shadow there, there's not much I can do about that, but you can probably see remains of where the boiler tubes were, some sort of pipe, and in fact a flanged pipe fitting of some kind. Again, haven't excavated any of that. Now there's some local folklore that says this was a boiler that was used on a locomotive, vertical boiler, to run the original bogies and logs back over to the sawmill, but apparently it was not powerful enough to get over the actual ridge line, which isn't very high. It's only about 15 metres above level here, and hence they built a cutting and then used other locomotives. But it's highly unlikely it was a steam engine boiler. More likely it came from a drower. They were a flat-bottomed paddle wheeler vessel, perfect for these shallow lakes and rivers. They were used to transport timber around and logs across through these lakes and then down through the Mile Lakes, down to Port Stephens, and then transshipped to ports beyond that. And it's possible there was a drower wreck here, or left to rot, but we'll see about that. Early days. So as you can see, more sleepers, another bolt, and then the formation heads out into the water. You can see here also lots of rocks. So they've actually used rock underneath it as basically a bed for the formation, onto which they've put timber sleepers, used shell and sand as ballast, and rocks also along the outside edges to stop the erosion from what you can see, this wind bringing up a little bit of chop, which would eventually erode things away without maintenance. Now, let's have a look at this. This is one of the landings. So here's the tramway in front of us. What would have happened is these logs were obviously set out parallel to the tramway alignment. There's actually evidence on them of iron spikes. So I think what happened was they actually had timbers bolted onto the top of them, basically skid timbers, running perpendicular, the way I've got the staff there, and then the logs could have been rolled up and then levered up here and dropped onto the bogies. And again, there's another one, as you can see in the distance down there, and there's another one further on, and you can just see another one with a bit of wash and chop over the top of it near that marker beacon. And that marker beacon denotes where there's large logs under the water, which is basically right on the edge of what was the deepest water. Although the whole lake's no deeper than about 2 metres at this time, at this current level. Current level as it stands fluctuates, but it's between, now that it's open at the bar, between 0.3 and 0.5 of a metre versus 1.9 when it was right up the top there.